So they would read scripts of those characters, and then you're firsthand seeing how the child resonates, connects.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome all of our listeners and watchers to another episode of the UXR Minds podcast. And we're here, part three, with Amanda Jensen of this workshop series entitled Design With and Not At. So we've had two super interesting and useful, in my opinion, parts. So we had part one, co-design as a methodology, and then the last part we were focusing a bit more on how to develop this kind of user obsession within your team, and obviously when you're presenting your insights, and how to kind of create this buy-in, this fixation on our users. And in this part, we're going to be focusing more on kind of co-design in context. There's going to be a bit more of a practical vibe to this part. So thank you again for coming on, Amanda, to wrap up this workshop.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Three times the charm.
Yeah,
So,
three times the charm is true. Well, actually, it's the fourth time for you.
right, I guess so.
Part two was three times the
Fourth is
charm.
like, next level. We don't even
It
have a
is, it is.
full idiom for that. So.
Cool. So, you kind of, I don't know, like whet my appetite in private around some of the things you're going to be sharing. So, I'm going to leave the floor to you to kind of go into some of these examples that you would like to share.
Yeah. So, from a co-design and context experience, kind of genre, I have been doing design research, we'll call it just for easiness, in contexts like internationally, developing world,
Mm,
ethnographic, like on the field, living in country, all the way to, AI, product development, ed tech, that whole gamut. So,
mm,
one can quite literally apply this methodology and this practice, tenant ethos to whatever context they may be in currently.
mm.
So, like, I guess we'll start at the very beginning, as yeah, from The Sound of Music would say. Um, would be, my ethnographic work. I would say I had done research in Hong Kong and China and South Africa, like in my teens, like age, doing cool international work in teaching English and just cultural immersion, building
Mm,
rapport in similar, kind of village, city, or region. And then eventually in my adult life, I ended up working with UNICEF for a while. And so I was
mm,
kind of operating multiple research streams at once. So I was looking
mm,
at Coca colonization of
mm.
Coca-Cola in the region and what it had done to local beverage and
Oh,
cultural like tenants.
hmm,
And so I was looking at working with everyone from bar owners to grocery store connoisseurs or people running those stores, as well as just local members of the community. What it's done to specifically dance as a huge proponent in Ugandan and African culture, and soda and the sort of, it just isn't the best for your
oh,
health, and but it's
yeah.
it's everywhere. You go to and I was there many years ago, like 2016. You go to Kampala and everything is plastered with Coca-Cola advertising. And so I was
Mm,
very interested in the probing question of why is this here and is this welcomed? And so
mm,
that really led me into thinking and looking at these different groups and demos of people in the culture and turn to find out that
mm,
the local beverages. So there's this one called Omabisi, which is like a banana fermented juice. And it
oh,
was very local to the region for many, many, many years. And you couldn't find it anywhere. It was
uh,
dang near impossible to locate this drink because of the onslaught of this globalization of this Western
mm,
brand. And so
mm,
I was looking at that, and then I was looking at Amwala, which is like their local brew, drunken from a massive um, pot
mm.
collaboratively. Like everyone
Oh,
has
wow.
big straws. and
It's very
they
community vibe.
think of like There Will Be Blood, and you know that scene where it's the bowling
Oh.
alley, and I would take your straw and put it in your milkshake, and so for all cinephiles out there, but very very long straws, right?
Oh.
And you go to the bar, you all sit down with your big straw, and they're provided at the bar, and you drink out of
Mm.
this big vessel, and it's the
Oh
local
wow.
brew. And so I was interested in the language of both. And so I ended up working with local farmers market individuals, people in those bars, all these individuals, especially the dance community, as it's so culturally significant there,
Mm.
and not being able to access like these things, these bars going out of business because of pay to play, illusion of
Mm.
choice, Coca-Cola kind of coming in, homogenizing. So
Mm.
I created this communal vessel where it was a glass Coca-Cola bottle, but it was filled with the OMABC, the banana fermented
Yeah.
um, juice, and then it had a very long straws coming out of it that we used in the
Mm.
Walla. And so it was this cultural satirical critique on how might we reposition the what's seen as very individualistic in Western culture and make it collective. How do we
Mm.
kind of, fight back that
Oh.
narrative and weave in our own cultural identities and perspectives. And I co-created that with many a people, many a market vendor, cultural guides, all kinds.
Wow.
Did lots of
That
testing,
sounds
brought it
awesome.
to dance studios, brought it to local university squares and quads
Mm.
and all kinds of things, and sort
Wow.
of did like it's a Coke bottle, but it has all these cultural underpinnings, right?
Mm.
So that's an example of like an
Wow.
ethnographic work where over many weeks and months, like that specific stream of research was
Mm.
extremely like participant, like infused and led.
Yeah. And what was the response like? If you can share it, I don't know if it's NDA
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So it was pretty wild. I mean,
Mm.
the impression was just, you know, like I think, being able to have a thing that is maybe something you've never even voiced, like
Mm.
especially those in the dance community, like being able to have that beverage that's just like better for them or just more
Mm.
local to their culture or traditional heritage with this new lens and being able to have a bit of advocacy or kind of activist art. And it
Mm.
really opened up a dialogue around like, why do we welcome this and how could we bring back these
Mm.
vendors or, it sort of began to kind of ruminate a little bit of an
Mm.
ember on this topic in general.
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, like I've heard about this project before that you've done in our discussion, so it's nice to get a bit more insight into what that actually was and how you worked on that. How many were you like working on this project? Was it kind of just a big team of researchers, or was it proper
Oh no, it's
structured?
just me.
Ah, just you.
It
Okay,
was
so
just
not a
me
big
doing
team.
solo work. Yeah, so I
Oh,
was predominantly there, like with the umbrella of UNICEF, but I was able to pursue different research streams. So I had this
okay,
co-colonization bit. I was working on, childhood, early stage development of affirmation and
okay.
what that was with, junior, high or,
Mm.
like kind of middle school aged for those in the US
Mm.
students and or secondary school, I would say. And
Mm.
then I was doing additional research on like dance specifically, and that was a whole nother stream. But
Mm.
so I was kind of doing these like offshoots just totally solo. I
Oh.
had two other researchers from the States that we had traveled there, but they
Mm.
had their own research streams, and we would,
Mm.
commingle, chat it out, ride
Wow.
the taxis and things like to and fro to where we're going, and
Mm.
yeah, kind of
Awesome.
hang out.
That's really nice hanging out. Where was
Yeah.
this? This was in Uganda.
Kampala, Uganda.
Uganda. So just hanging out in Uganda. So,
Yeah, killing
so
it.
not the most common hangout spot. So that's super cool.
It's actually like,
Um,
I'm sure even more since 2016,
mm.
it's quite like a robotics and engineering hotbed. So there's a
Ah,
lot of emerging tech and really cool,
wow.
innovative, work that was happening there. And so like I was always kind of trying to attend a seminar or go to
Mm,
university there when they would have some expos of the
mm,
student work.
wow.
So that was just like not that I, pursued a full-on research stream, but it was just a really cool cultural
Mm,
identity topic of interest while I was, managing and leveraging those other research
yeah,
streams.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. So in terms of like the co-designing in context, that was obviously co-designing with your participants, with the users, etc. What sort of like how were you getting that feedback from users? Was it like just in-person interviews, talking with them? Did you run tests? How did that also work?
Yeah, mostly in person and a lot of just contextual inquiry
Okay.
and sort of just fly on the wall.
Oh,
And then, like some actual user testing. So iterations of that prototype, if you
okay.
will.
Yeah.
Playing around with straw length and,
Oh wow.
the getting the actual beverages or the OMABC was a little bit difficult. I had to go very far away to a market that still made it. And it was one
Oh
of the
wow.
few in the city that did that. It
Wow.
used to be rampant. You could go, you could
Wow.
turn in a corner and you could access. So
Awesome.
again, talking with those vendors, figuring out, watching how the
Mm.
OMABC is made,
Yeah.
sitting in the bar, joining in on the conversation, like around the umwala, that local
Mm.
brew. And so like just real immersion and then
Mm.
a lot of testing. But that was
Okay.
sort of graphic side of things. I've also obviously, and I've spoken this a little bit more in the earlier parts, but there's definitely lots of opportunities to do this in sort of the product and remote world as well. You don't have
Mm.
to person to, you know, um, work with your participants and,
Yeah.
design with them.
Yeah, that was something I was gonna say because obviously this was like full, like physical, hands-on,
Yeah.
in-person research, which now probably is a dying, a dying form of research. But obviously it
Mhm.
has its. I imagine it was amazing to do because you're there with the users. You can be the fly on the wall, which
Right.
you struggle to be the fly on the wall when you're there on a Zoom meeting or a
True.
Zoom call. So I
Mhm.
imagine that the form of research is slightly different as well. It's more, yeah, like you say, contextual. I was thinking it's a shame you weren't carrying a camera around because it would make for a really cool documentary to watch.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I have the work on my portfolio, but yeah, it doesn't have
Ah,
that documentarian Spinal Tap best in show
I've got
aesthetic to
Netflix
it.
series.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I was just thinking, like, from what you were saying, that you had to travel to this kind of this market to find this drink that
Yeah.
wasn't like it sounds something that would be very documentary. So
Right. Yeah,
that's cool.
absolutely.
Excellent. So that's one project you wanted to share. There was another one. Was it more around AI from what I
Yeah,
remember?
yeah.
Yeah.
So like in the product context for all my
Okay.
people out there who aren't, trekking in the mud of the regions that you're researching in, you can do this remotely. And I've
Mm,
spoken to it a bit, a touch in some of the prior parts, but this co-design can happen at the org level, which we've certainly
okay.
hit at. But also like with your participants. So
Mm,
whether you're co-creating in a Miro board or you're developing out, like a way of thinking or approaching the product, whether it's lo-fi or high fidelity, whatever state that we're in, nothing is final. I love to open my interviews with you're not going to ever ask a wrong question. There's no
mm,
right or wrong here. We're
mm,
discovering, we're journeying together. So ask away. If something looks goofy, let's talk about it. If you're wanting to dive into an area, like if you click this, what would happen? What do you think would happen? I
mm.
know what happened. And so I do a bit of like the play, like playing dumb, but
Yeah.
dare I say it's like playing reflexive,
Yeah.
playing objective, and just really sitting back and journeying. And like
Mm,
I've done this in contexts as where I'm working with middle school students remotely. So I've done it in the field and I've done it
mm.
remotely. Love the kids. But being able to like, oh, it looks like our teacher has this assignment for us today. Like I get on their level. Just because I'm an adult
Yeah.
doesn't mean I can't be like well, what is this? What
Mm,
would we do here? Do you, I mean,
mm,
what do you think? And what would you type? And so, like in that instance, like say it's a typing thing and we're early stage, it's not a coded product and we're
mm,
usability testing. I'm going to use my Teams or Zoom chat and they're going to type right in that. And then I'm going to have that. That's
yeah.
data. That's how I can leverage that early stage co-design work, also
Mm,
authentically coming from a user obsessed perspective in a
mm,
way that I can hand that off to my engineering team, my IDs, my learning
mm,
scientists, and say, look, this is actually what a middle school student would respond to this bot in this exercise that we're doing. You know,
yeah.
this is how they're postulating themselves when they're being pretend interviewed by, a reporter or a teacher on the other end of that exercise that they're kind of going through this learning assessment tool with. And so, you can use the chat for that. Obviously, the video recording. I often bring in. Again, we're focusing on the kids a little bit more, but like the characters in some of those learning
Mm,
assessment tools, I would have my observers, my team members act it out. So they would read the scripts of those characters, and then you're firsthand seeing how the child resonates, connects with
mm,
that character, how they respond verbally, what's their body language, what are they typing, how long do they type, all kinds of quantitative and
mm,
qualitative data. And that's really immersive. You're getting into the co-design bits, the participatory research, and the user obsession. Ding, 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 like all
yeah.
across the board. And that's that Wizard of Oz method. I just love it. But
Mm,
it's also just as beneficial when you're dealing with adults, whether it be in my space, I work in ed tech. So it's like lots of teachers, district leaders, and we're moving more so internally to serving like HR professionals and employees
mm,
themselves. So when I kind of get to the playing field, what do we think's happening here? Why do we care about this? What's going on, and how does this bring value to you? What do you do? What do you think
mm,
about the topic? If we're
mm.
just, you know, shooting it at the cooler and we're talking about what do we think here? Because I really try to level set, and whether that's with the employees or it's, internally or it's internal with HR, you know, where are you just in the mud and your
Mm,
tires stuck? How do we
mm,
unstick them? You know,
yeah.
and I think that is just time and time again. Again, it could be Miro stickies where they're in there and bebopping and we're just like blah 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 doing it. Or maybe they're clicking through the Figma that myself or the design team like rigged up to be super clickable. And we
Mm,
get to see what it might be like because we're not yet in code testing. And so we're just like, okay, well, you know, so then that's even more opportunity. Again, you get their verbal data, you get their quotes, their behavioral
mm,
bodily kind of response to it.
yeah.
And co-design really comes forward. So, no matter the context or really age demographic, whether you're working with, 10-year-olds or,
Mm,
those that are much more seniored and AVP level or running
mm,
their own companies or their district leaders, their admin
mm,
professionals, it doesn't matter. You
yeah.
can co-design and you can co-create and really be led through that user obsession because you open that door. You
Mm,
level set and you get on that same parameter. Hierarchy gets removed and we're
mm,
vibing.
yeah.
We're figuring it out together and,
Mm,
and how to make this thing great.
yeah. Yeah. No, no, that's an amazing piece of advice, and it's something that I've always tried to do, and I probably need to improve. Is yeah, that making sure you vibe with the users, you build that rapport with them in whatever context that might be. And obviously, we're in your ed tech space. Obviously, you're maybe interviewing school children, etc. So how you build that rapport is going to be different to maybe someone that I was speaking to in the satellite industry world. And so you also the language you use, the
Right.
sort of vibing you do with them.
Mhm.
And I noticed that like some existing users I would maybe interview and have involved in research multiple times, you even in some ways build up a bit of a friendship. And I found that that's when I would get the best feedback because they were being honest. They knew that they could tell me things
Yeah.
um, on a peer-to-peer level. They didn't
Yeah.
feel like they were going to hurt my feelings or I was going to kick
Right.
them off the research study.
Yeah.
So, because I did have some say, "Oh, don't like get rid of me if I say this." So, like, if you remove those barriers and that fear that they have, especially
Yeah.
also the fear and the anxiety that maybe they have being involved in research, because from the
100%.
I've always thought like on the other side, it must
Mm,
be kind of daunting. You're getting invited to this interview, they're going to ask you these questions, and it's almost
yeah.
like a bit of an exam. And you're like,
Right.
and I've had users who you can clearly visibly tell that they're anxious or nervous, and I really wanted to eliminate that feeling. I didn't want them to feel
Oh,
they were
yeah.
in that sort of environment. They were just kind of having a chat about that. They were there. They're actually doing me a favor by being there. It wasn't the other way around. So that's yeah, some good advice.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I think it just comes from trial and error. And
Yeah.
I personally love like a new product team, a new
Mm,
like mo because I mean, what does that do? It builds your prowess as a researcher, right? Your ability to have that emotional EQ with a
mm,
child and really connect with them and
yeah.
say that, and I've had them super shy babies, and they are
Yeah.
just like themselves nervous. They're like talking to like a scary person. But I'm just like, what are we gonna? And
Yeah.
literally, I'll say it confidently, 10 times out of 10, midway through that interview, they have bloom, blossom, chatterbox. Like they are
Yeah.
just, going on. And similarly, it's like with, you're interviewing adults. I don't care what industry, what discipline, you open up the call, woof, like what a crazy week, or oh, the holidays, I can't, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And just kind of water cooler a bit
Yeah.
because that again eases the anxiety.
Yeah.
You're an ally now,
Mm, mm-hmm.
and we're the same.
Yeah.
And if we're similar, I feel more inclined that I can be comfortable and transparent and
Yeah.
open with. And
Yeah.
so I think that, that openness and also like, again, use case specific. If I'm dealing with internal like team members, maybe I have worked with them on a prior team or maybe this
Mm,
or the other. So like allow for humor, allow
yeah.
for like fluidity and fun
Yeah.
and, we love a sarcasm. So something that ice-breaking moment or just a funny that happens in the midst of the interview, just
Mm,
and be open
mm,
to how it expands. I'm pretty like a huge advocate of like, yes, it's good practice to write the protocol, think through all the ways in which it could pan out,
mm,
how we
yeah.
might correctively journey. Personally, I don't look at it again.
Mm.
Like after, but once I'm in the interview, I'm just like,
Zen.
and just it, and you know
Yeah.
the flow. But what does that also do? It's reflexive. It gets you out of
Mm,
it gets you out
yeah.
of the team's head, and it
Mm,
enables the user the driver's seat
yeah.
you know and of course like I've known that protocol in and out. I drafted the whole thing. I
Mm,
interwove all my cross-functional members feedback, and I obviously like am sticking to it, time boxing, like all that's happening, but I'm more so speaking to the notion of it's not Bible, and it's
mm,
not something that I am going to be lock and key, cannot deviate. Like I had an interview recently where we went 20 minutes, wasn't even related to the, but it was
yeah.
a need that we had never charted before. So
Yeah.
we found an entire new use case and potentially a whole new product flow based on that discovery. Had
Yeah.
I been, lockstep and like,
Yeah.
well,
Stuck
gotta
to a
look at this.
script.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
I would have missed it. Or
Yeah.
also, what is your rapport if I cut you off, say, actually, we got to get back to
Yeah.
this, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's all down to just basic human interaction.
Yeah.
Obviously, like making sure you listen to them if you keep cutting them off, or like
Mhm.
it shows to that person that you almost don't really care about what they really have to say. You just want to
Right.
like tick
Right.
box and I need to get through these questions. I've got a conveyor belt. and you don't want to like come across with that vibe. So like I would always prepare a script, like obviously
Right.
like all questions, but I'd always be super flexible on it.
Yeah.
Obviously you've got the questions of you, sorry, the thing you need to remember. Obviously you don't want
Yeah.
to kind of skew the research by having each person have different questions, but within
Yeah.
that framework,
Yeah.
obviously allow for, like you say, allow for those conversations that go 20 minutes off on a
Yeah.
different tangent, because that's probably when you do find those nuggets that you're like, oh, this is what I was actually really looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No. That's cool. But thanks for running this workshop. It was really insightful and eye-opening, and it's given me again the fire to to make sure that I continue to be user obsessed. And also just thank you for sharing those more in context experiences. They're also really interesting, and hopefully gives our users. See, I'm already user obsessed.
Yeah, I
Our
mean,
listeners, our listeners, the context that they need to be
yeah.
able to apply the things that we've discussed, but obviously you've put together. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And I have a lot of the work that I spoke about on my portfolio, and you're
Mm,
welcome to Bebop, check that out. I'm on LinkedIn, always like
yeah,
influencing. So anyone who's interested in learning more about this or ways to weave this into their own workflow or practice, or maybe they realize that they've been doing it all along, but they didn't have the words or vocab to put into it, whatever it may be. Just I'm always open to chatting, so hit me
yeah.
up.
And I can vouch for that. Amanda's always super open in her DMs. Even if she's busy, she's always there to respond. So, and also, yeah, her portfolio is amazing. So it does give you the more visual, like, and also written representation of what you discussed earlier on the Coca-Cola kind of work that you did, research that you did. So yeah, I'll tag all those things in the post for this episode. But thank you again, Amanda. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to see how everything turns out. Appreciate you having me.